Hello and welcome to Raisina 2025 Ideas Pod. Today we have Admiral Samuel Paparo, Commander U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, and we will be discussing issues around the maritime space, the Indo-Pacific, what America's role in the Indo-Pacific means for America of today, and what it means for its partners, friends and allies in the region. So welcome to this Ideas Pod. I just wanted to start by looking at some of the big trends that we are witnessing in the maritime space in the Indo-Pacific. Of course, it has been now the center of gravity of global politics in more ways than one. When you, as a maritime commander, looks at this region, what are the challenges you foresee, and what are the challenges you are planning for?
Yes. I'll say first, I'm the joint commander, but that joint commander involves much maritime space. Seeing the challenge and seeing the maritime space, because the Indo-Pacific does comprise so much maritime space, and the maritime space is so very important to all the world, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. These challenges are because since for the last 25 years, the global economy has grown about fourfold, but the amount of maritime traffic has grown tenfold. So you see the impact of maritime traffic on the global economy and the very high leverage that it has. And here in among these very challenges, you see the challenges to the norms within this space. And those challenges to the norms involve excessive claims, claims beyond the United Nations Conventions of the Law of the Sea. You see the growth of capability here in the Indo-Pacific, particularly within the People's Republic of China. Just in the last 25 years, you see the growth, a tenfold growth in their air, missile, maritime capability, and within their space capability, 100-fold. And then you see, even in their Pacific fleet, you see a significant growth in the Russian Pacific fleet. And you see alarming capabilities, or at least ambitions, for the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in their submarine fleet, and issues of proliferation. We also see challenges in piracy, illicit trafficking, as well as natural disasters. It is, after all, the 20th anniversary, or the 20th commemoration of the Aceh tsunami, among many other disasters. And so throughout the Indo-Pacific, there are challenges throughout. And so from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, this encompasses 80% of the world's population, and probably 80% of the world's economy, and is the cockpit of the world's economy and growth. And so thus are the challenges that face us.
And so in terms of American force projection in this part of the world, there are some concerns about the fact that maybe American policies have become more inward-oriented. Do you agree with that assessment over the last few years that we've seen, and particularly now with the new administration in Washington, making some demands about responsibility in, for example, in Europe? Do you think that will also imply more burden sharing in the Indo-Pacific with allies and partners? How are you looking at this churn where allies and partners are also required to pick up more of the slack?
Well, first I'll stress the incoming secretary's guidance to the force, which concerned the warrior ethos, rebuilding and accelerating the capability of the force, reforming the defense acquisition system to make it more responsive to growing technology, focusing on the Indo-Pacific and allies and partners. And so each one of those would seem to actually be the inverse of what you had said. And the focus on burden sharing among our European partners, I think, is really focused on all of us linking arms together to face the threats that face us all, that understand that as the Indo-Pacific becomes a center of gravity, it doesn't mean that other states matter less. It just means that since the end of the Second World War, 60% of the world has been lifted out of poverty. And that 60% of the world that's been lifted out of poverty is here in the Indo-Pacific, and more shall be. And this is how the center of gravity here has shifted. And with that shift has also become a lift in the military capability and some intentions, and it bears our attention, and thus we shall.
Admiral, are you worried that we have had multiple crises now, multiple wars now raging in the world, in Europe, in Middle East? When you look at the strategic environment in the Indo-Pacific, there are some flashpoints that have been signaling a danger sign for a while. You have Taiwan Strait, or you have South China Sea, where a lot has happened, and then there's a lot of pushback and pullback from various actors. What's your assessment about the likelihood of a real-time crisis emerging in the region? It's always difficult to predict such things, but in your assessment, are you prepared for those eventualities that might emerge over the course of the next
Well,
few
I've been
decades?
assigned to worry about crises, as you could probably guess. So yes, we are concerned. Those crises in Europe, those crises and those conflicts in the Middle East, is that there's an immediate duty to deal with them from an interest standpoint. There's also an immediate duty in the Indo-Pacific, as tragic as they are, to learn what must be learned from them and to apply those lessons from them. And that the immediate learning those lessons of them, and to the extent that we can directly apply the lessons of them that are applicable, add to the deterrence factor that we can bring to bear here in the Indo-Pacific, and that they're shared with our allies and partners so that they make us stronger. And when the crises and the conflicts in Europe and the crises and the conflicts in the Middle East deplete our magazines, it means that we've got to work harder to refill our magazines. And this is where reforming our defense acquisition systems and making it more responsive and making it faster is what the Secretary is focused on.
I mean, one of the interesting aspects of the Indo-Pacific has been that the idea of Indo-Pacific, as it emerged, as it has emerged over the last few years, is now widely accepted. The logic is accepted. But you do have certain countries, particularly China, for example, that is still not comfortable with this idea of the Indo-Pacific. They look at it as a containment idea, and certain other countries have also supported this vision. Now, when you look at what is perceived to be a growing competition between two major powers in the world, US and China, are you concerned that the Chinese look at the region through a very different lens, and that this might lead to more misperceptions and miscalculations?
If you look at the trajectory of the U.S. force posture in the Indo-Pacific, today there are 60,000 American troops in Japan. In the height of the 1950s, there were 200,000. There are 29,000 U.S. troops in Korea. At the height, 25, 30 years ago, there were 60,000. There are 0 U.S. troops stationed in the Philippines. 30 years ago, there were 13,000 troops in the Philippines. And yet there's this new narrative of containment. And yet in the last 40 years, the United States presented most favored nation status to the People's Republic of China, championed its entry into the World Trade Organization, and began trade relations that made each other its biggest trade partners. And somehow this has become some narrative of containment when there are mutual defense treaties between the United States and Korea that spanned to 1953, the United States and Japan that spanned to 1961, and the United States and the Republic of the Philippines that go to 1951. And so now all of a sudden there's this issue of containment. Maybe the new issue is one of expansion, and if you are expanding, maybe you view it as containment. But all the behaviors of the United States in all of these years have been ones of embracing, but excessive maritime claims are expanding. The growth of the military has been one of expanding, and so this is my view on this form, on this discussion of containment.
Admiral, one of the strengths of American force posture in the Indo-Pacific has always been its partnerships, its allies, the way those alliances have been structured. So from, as you mentioned, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and then you also have Philippines. What is your expectation from the alliance partners now that the world is entering into a phase of more and more churn and more competition, more geopolitical contestation? The expectation of which used to be America is the preeminent guarantor of security to one where America in partnership with some of these countries. Do you see that transition happening? Do you see more responsibilities some of these partners can take, more defense spending perhaps some of these partners can do? Because that's a conversation that's beginning to happen both in the region and beyond. What's your take on how your alliance partners should be responding to some of these more prevalent developments?
Since the end of the Second World War, and in fact throughout the Second World War, the United States has never entered into an operation without allies and partners. This narrative that the United States was the guarantor of the rules, the United States was never the guarantor of the rules. The rules long predated the United States of America, the principles of sovereignty and freedom of navigation. These principles long predated the United States. And these coalitions, the United States have long been members of these coalitions, and expectations of each other. These are the words of senior on junior. We don't call them expectations. We call them mutual obligations, as we have in mutual defense treaties. When you have an alliance and a partnership, like you have in a friendship, you have mutual obligations to one another. You don't place demands or place expectations on one another too. You link arms as you do in a friendship, and you do your part. And among my partners, among my fellow defense leaders too, we have that expectation, that wanting to do our part among each other, and that's that's how we think about it. And I do see that ambition from my counterparts among our allies and our partners.
Admiral, as we round off this conversation, I think I want to bring it back to India, where we are sitting at the moment. India-US partnership, particularly in the maritime space, has been developing quite fast, and the convergence on the Indo-Pacific had been quite significant. How do you see that partnership develop, and what are the expectations again from that particular partnership? Is it more focused on the Indian Ocean, or is it more broader about India's perhaps engagement in the wider Pacific region as well?
Yes, I think the market democracies are long superseding just simple geographies. The market democracies around the world, Japan, Europe, Korea, Canada, the United States, in all the Americas. And our trade relationships don't just span geographies, they span cyberspace. And India is on a tremendous growth trajectory and is more and more taking its place as a global leader. And though India treasures its place as a non-aligned country, more and more as two democracies with the same values, our interests are more and more coming together, and our behaviors, particularly in the security department, are also more and more coming together. And you see this in our in the Quad and our diplomatic programs. And then you also separately see this in our exercise programs, in our Tiger Triumph programs, a humanitarian assistance disaster relief, in our maritime programs, in our security cooperation programs, even in some of our land exercises together. And over the next generation, I think you'll continue to see that on an upward trajectory as India continues to take a leadership role among the market democracies, and United States and India will see its relationship enrich.
Thank you, Admiral. Thank you for this wonderful conversation about the Indo-Pacific, about U.S. role there, and about the partnership that U.S. has with India in the Indo-Pacific. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you to all.